It's post-Thanksgiving, and while the cat, known as Brendan, is away, the mice will play. I got a new friend with me, the Flying Hawaiian. Let's see what's going on tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pick Six podcast. I am Jacob Westdorf, and I am not as good at the intros as Brendan Dworzinski is. So that, named after Mikey Sainristil himself, Mike Kawano, joining us tonight from Hawaii. It is like 1 o'clock in the afternoon over there for some stupid reason because time zones exist. And that is, in fact, a thing. Guys, welcome to the show. I'm happy to be here. I am happy to be talking some Green Bay Packers with you. Brendan Dworzinski, my normal host, is out and about, big timing me. He's calling a basketball game tonight, I believe. I think it's the Kansas Jayhawks. I could be wrong if it's Kansas or not. I did not ask. But let's dive right in. Mike, normally this is where we go with the extra point and we find a question, maybe not necessarily related to the Green Bay Packers or not necessarily, or maybe related to like what we thought. So last week we did, the Mount Rushmore of teams maybe we don't like so very much, and we kind of all decided that we hated the Vikings and everything like that. But there's only one question that I can ask for the extra point this week. And Mike, that question, who has got it better than us?
Nobody.
Nobody is right. That is the extra point. We'll get there just real quick, Mike. 3 in a row, beating up on Ohio State for the third year in a row. What the question I have based off of the extra point, 21, 22, or 23. I'm asking you to pick one of your favorite children, but which one's your favorite of the 3 games?
Oh, I think it's this year because of all the stupid shit that's come out this year. This one this was like a 3-1. It revalidates, not outside of Ann Arbor, not outside of anyone who wears the maize and blue or cheers for the maize and blue, but for all the people outside who drank the poison Kool-Aid, this one, it recertifies that the other 2 count, and this one counts for 3-1. So yeah, that's why this one I'm going to say is my favorite one.
Not a bad point. A lot of cool stuff that happened. Obviously, Blake Corum scoring right after Zach Zinter's injury, doing the 6-5 in the camera after that was pretty cool. The Rod Moore interception, Gus Johnson freaking out, screaming Rod Moore's name afterwards. The answer for me is going to be 2021 because you never forget your first, as they say. And I don't know that the next 2 happen if that first one doesn't. So maybe of the 3 Michigan teams, that's the worst one of these 3, but that was the best win. And in the snow, the photos, all that stuff that came out of it, the fans rushing the field, Aiden Hutchinson, just that big smile on his face after the game was over. But yeah, it's great to be a Michigan Wolverine, man. They're going to face the Iowa Hawkeyes on Saturday. My buddy Iowa Joe may be here at some point or another. Maybe he's boycotting because he knows what's coming for him on Saturday night and then by extension next Tuesday. But the Packers, Mike, 29-22 over the Detroit Lions in a game that could have been like 45-14. Like I really felt that Green Bay put together its best game of the season. That goes for offense and defense. I know that the defense gave up like a pile of yards and everything like that. But it starts very simply with the quarterback, and that's this week's Jordan Love performance review is what we talk about every week because this season is about Jordan Love. And to me, the whole tone of this game was set. As Don Brown once said, solve your problems with aggression. First play of the game, they're an 8.5-point underdog. They're at Ford Field, a place they haven't played that well at, especially in recent memory. They hadn't beaten the Lions. The Lions had won the last 3 against the Packers up until Thursday. And the first play, they throw caution to the wind, and they throw a bomb down the field to Christian Watson for 53 yards, which was a big deal for both Jordan Love and Christian Watson, who loved to get him in the rhythm, and Christian Watson to get some confidence going because as many flowers as I've thrown to Jaden Reed and Dontavion Wicks and guys like that, Christian Watson is still their most talented receiver. And getting him up and moving, I think this offense is at its best when it runs through Christian Watson and his abilities and when he's playing well and deserving of those opportunities to run through him. Overall, I think at the end of this game, you say that Jordan Love just played his best game as a passer and has me to the point where I'm saying I'm not all the way to the point of like it's over, sign him to an extension tomorrow. But if they beat Kansas City this weekend and he plays well again, I'm there. And like I was not there 6 weeks ago, and I think that was justified too. That's kind of the ebb and flow of the season. But as the receivers have started to make more plays for him, he started to look better. Perhaps not coincidental in that nature at all. But just overall, Mike, what was your take on Love coming out of this game and then looking forward? Because I know you were a little more optimistic than I was even after the slump that they were going through.
Yeah, I think this is just what people like me have been waiting for, honestly, and like you said, a big part of it is the guys around him are playing better because as good as a quarterback is, I mean, we're seeing it with Mahomes a little bit where we kind of thought like he would be a little bit almost not roster proof out, I guess is the term you would use, because it's like, well, he still has Kelsey and they've got enough guys that can kind of figure it out around him. And we've seen that Chiefs offense struggle some. And, you figure Jordan is doing that without a Kelsey. So it's not apples to apples, but it's sort of the same thing where it's like, there was going to always be struggles. And even for me, when he was in that stretch between, the first Lions game and that Vikings game, there were points where you're kind of like, ugh, like, is that regression? Is that bad habits that are forming? Whatever way you want to say what you were seeing out of his play, you're kind of like, oh no, like, this is the guy we saw in the preseason that, like even you were saying, like, at the very least, he's not going to be a bust kind of thing. It's like, oh,
Right.
like, is he backtracking from that? And just to see, from that Rams game, and it's kind of, at the time we were all kind of like rolling our eyes, but you heard Jason Vrabel say it, you heard LaFleur say it, and more of like Vrabel and Reed and Jaden Reed and stuff, where they were kind of saying like, it's coming, like we're getting a handle on it. And I know LaFleur, everyone kind of is like, oh, like, we don't care, LaFleur, like, you're going to say whatever. But hearing it from the rest of the guys in the room kind of saying, like, just hang on a sec, wait one more game for us. And they kind of have been right. That Rams game was a turning point, and we have seen Love play, some form of a little bit to a lot better every week since then. And I'm with you. Like, this Chiefs game, as if Love plays really well, no matter what the outcome of the game is, I think this is what Goot has been waiting for all season, where it's like, I've got a deal that's, I have a Word file on my computer, and I'm just like, okay, like, have we seen it? Have we seen it? Have we seen it? Kind of thing. And that would be the game where it's like, yeah, you go on a 3-game win streak, you put the team back at 500, the playoffs are completely, they're in the driver's seat at this point. Like, they are totally in control at this point. But like, you beat this Chiefs team that completely, and it's something that Joe and I talked on our podcast, the Ohana Packers Edition podcast, where it's like, this season is all about, the phrase for this season is resetting expectations. Week 1, reset expectations. Week 3, reset expectations. And then that, 4-week losing streak or whatever, that reset expectations the other way. But now you're seeing the trend arrow point back upward in the positive direction. And like you said, like, if they beat the Chiefs, and especially if Love plays really well, this is going to be stupidly insufferable going forward no matter what really happens the rest of the season. But it would be, I don't want to say the crowning achievement on Love's young career, but it would be up, it'd be up somewhere in that level.
Oh, if you beat the Chiefs, you beat Patrick Mahomes, then I know he's not playing against the quarterback, but you beat that defense. This is the best defense that Green Bay is going to play so far this season. We'll get to that here in just a little bit too. But I think that it was also kind of for the whole team a bit of a pushback moment. We've talked about it. I've talked about it as the Packers get punched in the mouth and then they will. Well, this time they had gotten punched and pushed around by the Lions the first time the two teams played. And it would have been very easy for them to just sit there and kind of lay down and take it again. But they didn't do that. They pushed back against a team that was that's the division bully now. The first time these two teams played each other, the Lions and the Packers, both teams were 2-1. It was at Lambeau Field, and it felt like there was an establishment of there's a pecking order here, and we're not there. The Packers are not there. They're still. I know we're getting all giddy and everything like that, and deservedly so. There's some semblance of reality that still has to be made. This is still a third place team, but it's a third place team that's trending upward, which, like you mentioned, Mike, Seattle has a loaded schedule in the next few weeks. They play the Niners, they play the Cowboys, they play a bunch of teams here in the next couple of weeks to potentially knock them down a peg or two. The Vikings looked terrible last night and lost one of the worst football games I have ever seen with these two eyes. So, Josh Dobbs, as he come back to earth, they'll get Justin Jefferson back. I'm sure that'll help a thing or two, but who knows? Who knows how their season's going to go. Green Bay now, even after this game when they played Detroit or Kansas City, the rest of the games on their schedule look pretty winnable. The tough ones being on the road against Minnesota, road team in a weird environment. Green Bay just won a game like that, though, against a better team. And that's really it. Like the Giants, terrible. The Bucks, not very good, and it's at Lambeau. The Panthers are the worst team in the NFL, one of the worst teams in sports. Then the Vikings and the Bears at home to finish the season. So to cue your Jim Mora quotes, the playoffs are a realistic thing at this point. And even in the real playoffs, you know what I mean? I always joke that the 7 seed is a participation trophy wildcard team. Like the Packers have a chance to make the real playoffs, as in a top 6 seed with Jordan Love as a first-year starter. And what that would do, I don't think I can emphasize enough how much the 6 seed would be important in this case, because the 1 or the 2 seed is going to be Philadelphia or San Francisco. Sorry, not going to go well for Green Bay, I don't think. But that's a long ways from now. The nice thing is, the inventor of the Oreo, the great Mark Trova, says, the Rams game was kind of like see the ball go through the net. And that is, I think that's fair. I think that it wasn't pretty, but they started to see some stuff. And then they played the Chargers, who, their defense stinks, but they kind of slowed down Justin Herbert. And we'll get to the Joe Barry stuff here in just a little bit. Everybody's favorite defensive coordinator, Joe Barry, that is not going to get fired, let go, whatever. And I'm sorry, I guess that was a spoiler, but it's not going to happen, guys. I'm sorry that I'll just jump into it now, whatever. Over the last 16 games, the Packers defense gives up on average 19 points per game. And I know that is not a tell-all statistic. I am not advocating for Joe Barry to keep his job. However, I will say, if Joe Barry's name was Robert Saleh and the Packers do the same thing defensively that they just did to the Lions with Corey Ballantyne and Carrington Valentine playing cornerback, I promise you the conversation we're having surrounding the defensive coordinator is altogether different. I'm almost certain of that. And reputations drive narratives, and I understand how that works. That is just kind of the nature of the beast, and that is okay. But, Mike, it's hard to envision at this point. Is Barry's seat even warm?
At this point, based on track record and his relationship with LaFleur, no. The only way there's 2 things that I can think of happening, and I think they have to happen in conjunction with each other. I don't think even one of them happening. I don't think it's even an either or. I think it has to be a both. Is Saleh gets tanked, he gets fired in New York, and the Packers miss the playoffs not because of Love and the offense, but because the defense just absolutely sucks and lets a bad Panthers team, a bad Bucks team, a bad Giants team score like 24 to 30 points on them every, like that. It would have to be that scenario because, you hear the whole Packers assistants have 3-year contracts and blah, blah, blah. And then maybe at that point they do we just agreed not to extend the relationship and, they go that route and stuff. But I've accepted the likely reality like you have that Barry is going to be our coordinator in 2025. I've choosing that I must start to get used to seeing our edge rushers line up as what can only be described as 15 techniques out in the G gap. And that's just going to be the reality. So yeah, I'm there with you. It's going to take multiple Herculean efforts for that not to be the reality next year.
Herculean efforts in the wrong direction, that
Yeah.
is, and that's where the issue I have is just the style of defense in general. I just don't agree with it. That's why I say,
Yeah.
if you're going to fire Barry, for example, and just hire Brandon Staley, then I have no use for that. Just keep Joe Barry. What's the difference other than
He's
Staley's
just a younger Barry, honestly.
Right. So I don't have much interest in that. If you want, not to bring everything, but since Iowa Joe's here, I suppose I could talk about it a little bit. But the style of defense that I kind of like is the way Michigan runs their defense, which is in conjunction. If you want to go into the pros, that's the way Baltimore runs their defense. Jesse Minter, a disciple of Mike McDonald, the current Ravens defensive coordinator. Just the overall discipline that they have as a front and the gap assignment, the sound assignment football that they play. And they have playmakers too. So if you think about it, if Green Bay was coached to play that way and just do everything good, but maybe nothing great, and then eventually your great players would be able to do things again, Michigan had a defense like that under Mike McDonald, where they were gap sound, they were assignment sure, everything like that. Oh, and then they had David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson, and that's where they got their big plays. Green Bay could easily do that. They have the personnel for stuff like that. They'd have to teach guys to be a lot more disciplined, but that's where the coaching part falls in. Like Devontae Wyatt being selfish and hopping out of gaps all the time, that's a coaching thing, in my opinion. So if you teach these guys to be assignment sure, and then all of a sudden it's, well, we've got Rashawn Gary and Jair Alexander, and that's when it's like, okay, now you see those playmakers, and the Packers have so much talent, as we always say on defense. That's where some of that stuff can shine through. That is the issue I have with Joe Barry more so than just kind of him in general. I often say this, the list of issues the Packers have, and that list is getting smaller now, but a while ago I did say the list of issues that come before who the Packers defensive coordinator is massive before you get to the fact, there might have been a point in 2021 maybe where Green Bay's biggest problem was the fact that Barry was the defensive coordinator. But at the same time, here's another thing, Mike. Green Bay's best defensive performances in the playoffs or in big spots since the Super Bowl season have been coordinated by Joe Barry, which is interesting enough just because I wonder if we're having this conversation at all if Green Bay finishes off San Francisco like they should have, having given up 0 touchdowns in that game. They would have bombed the Rams and then won the Super Bowl. Are we even having this? I guess that's, if we're a fifth, we'd all be drunk, but
if pigs could fly. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of stuff like that. I don't know. I'm often a believer.
My whole thought on is when you have a Rashawn Gary pop off for the game on Thanksgiving he had and stuff, you have Rasul get pick sixes and stuff. It's not when it's different defensive coordinators, you're it feels like it's partly that. I mean, Rashawn has the game he had on last week Thursday. It's almost like he had it on his own or in spite of Perry, kind of like that. And I know that I've got it the way I want to see it and stuff like that. But just when you look at how he aligns his defense, what he asks guys to do, the way I look at it is it's instead of having a charge the ball mindset from baseball, it's the outfield, take a step back, take 2 steps back before you make a play on it kind of thing. And that affects everything that his defense does. So yeah, it is what it is. And that's why I kind of think they're going to keep adding talent to it and kind of seeing where it goes from there. But yeah, I've just to put a bow on it from my end. Yeah, I've allowed myself to understand that Barry is probably the defensive coordinator for another year.
Now I do think, like you said, things go south in New Jersey to our friends with Green Bay East. Listen, I can't say too much because I'm going to get in trouble if I do, but a shitstorm is a brewing. I'll leave it at that. But there are things that are going to happen, and maybe that won't necessarily mean certain people get fired and everything like that. But if Saleh gets fired, that's one of those situations where Matt has to look and just be like, Joe, sorry, this is like something I just couldn't refuse. It's the equivalent of if, like, when the Cardinals had Josh Rosen and they liked him kind of, but they saw Kyler Murray and couldn't pass that up. Or, if a team this year, they kind of like their quarterback, but they're in position to draft Caleb Williams. It's like, well, sorry, man. It's just like, I can't pass that up. That's just the way that it has to be, is I have to take this person. And I would like to think, because Saleh is buddies with LaFleur, that that's something that could happen. But we'll see. Green Bay also could play a lot of games down the stretch where they don't play well on defense. And that's hard to envision with Tommy DeVito and Bryce Young on the schedule and Justin Fields down the stretch here. But I don't know, and then another point here from True North Packers fan is, can Saleh teach the Packers to tackle? And this is one of the downsides to the new CBA, man. Every year when we get into these labor disputes, nobody likes talking about it. It's funny listening to Tom Brady talk about, like, this new era, football's soft and everything, doing what old people do when they're not doing it anymore. I agree with him. It's just funny that he's saying it. But there's only one way to get better at playing football, and that's by playing football. And these guys, they don't practice tackling. And that's why, like, when you get into the college game, for example, they can practice tackling. And that's why when somebody's like, Wisconsin fans will say all the time, why are the Badgers better at tackling than the Packers? It's like, well, they probably practice tackling a little bit more than the Packers do. So that's certainly part of it. And I think that that's one of the reasons for the decline in overall play here across the NFL, is like, they're just playing football less and less. And there's some positives to that, certainly, but I think there's some negatives to it too. And I was talking with Ken Ingalls about this, where when the Rodgers talked about, like, during the CBA once, saying, like, they need to be powerful at the negotiating table and united when they're doing stuff like that, and, everything like that. And the players basically give up things the owners do not care about. Like, hey, we want time off and to smoke weed. And the owner's like, okay, we'll take the revenue sharing. We'll make sure the franchise tag is still in, like, just some of the stuff that bends the players over the barrel. And, somebody's got to help the players, in my opinion. I think Rodgers was trying that, and that's why he's not doing it anymore. But, to get them to care more about some of that stuff. But one of the things they do seem to care about is time off. And I understand that too. Paid more, work less. Makes perfect sense to me. But that's just kind of how it rolls, right? So
Yep.
That's going to be the interesting part of it. That's a little bit, we're further off of here like that. Let's get real quick to the Raising Canes. If you want to sponsor the show, Canes, I am more than happy to let you do that. But the boy, he did it, player of the week. So, Mike, I'm going to let you pick first from the Lions game. Who was your boy, he did it, player of the week? And a bonus. Think of it as a Caniac combo. Player of the week, Michigan and Ohio State.
All right. For the Packers, it is our Michigan Wolverine, Rashawn Gary. Just the multiple narratives. One, it directly impacted the Packers' winning chances on Thursday. Him having the kind of game that he did, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, recovered one of them. Jonathan Owens recovered the other one, returned it for a touchdown. And he, on the week of the game, dominated the Buckeye that was across from him playing for the Lions. So that's the second narrative. And then the overarching one is that this is the field that took his season away from him last year. And he was in the midst. He was gonna kill he's never had a double-digit sack season. He's not this, he's not that. He can't be the leader. He was having an elite pass rushing season, and it got cut short. And it was honestly, that was when I kind of checked out on last season, because I was like, I don't know if Aaron's going to play better. And I was like, at least, and that was the thing we kind of talked about, is when they started to go on their run at the end of the season, I'm like, who's going to rush the passer at this point? Because that guy is out on IR and he ain't coming back till next year. So to have Rashawn back, to be there, and to just have that kind of a game in a place where somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, fuck this turf. Like, this is where I screwed up my knee and I lost, the best season I was having in my career. So big hats off to Rashawn. And then also, like, just the bro love that he has for Jordan Love is really fun to follow. And then from our Wolverines, it's it's Blake Corum. It's the guy who, passed up a chance to go to the pros. I was honestly shocked he came back. I thought it was a no-brainer for him to go. You're a running back who's, been a bell cow kind of thing. Like, those kind of guys, you go get to the pros, and because that's the whole thing everyone says is like, go get your second, get yourself in position to get a second contract. But he said, no, I couldn't help my team last year in the playoff. I wasn't able to, basically didn't play against Ohio State last year, came back. And as he said, he wanted to cement his legacy, and he cemented his legacy in the big house on Saturday. So Blake Corum, but there were so many of them I could name, and I won't go on a hard line name the whole roster. So over to you.
Game-winning touchdowns will do that. So originally in my article that I post on Packer Central after the game, and I don't make any money unless you guys click that link. So please click those links after the games are over. But I gave my game ball to Rashawn Gary. But since you did that, I'll go with somebody else. It's Jordan Love. And those were the two guys that I had in consideration between those two things. I could have given a nod here to Christian Watson or Jonathan Owens as well. So now as I'm starting to name the entire roster. But this whole season is about Jordan Love. We've talked about this 1,000 times over. The Packers can go 6-11, and it's fine if Love looks like a franchise quarterback. The good news I have for you is it looks like Green Bay is going to win more than 6 games this season. And I'm interested to see what that looks like by the end of the year. But winning is a lot more fun than losing. I can confirm that particular thing. But Love, this is a guy who, in my opinion, looked like a completely different quarterback than the one that we watched 3-4 weeks ago. That back foot is hitting. The ball is ripping. We're not clicking heels. Yeah, we underthrow a deep ball here or there still, but those are things that are trending upwards as well. Like everything about Jordan Love's game is trending skyward. And I said it after the week 4, 5, 6 stretch. Is from an intangible standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a guys want to play for him standpoint, all that stuff. Jordan Love is everything you could ever want. He is Jalen Hurts from that standpoint. He's like, you see those guys, you listen to the way the Eagles talk about Jalen, it's the same way the Packers talk about Jordan. It's the same stuff. So I think that matters, but it doesn't matter that much if you're going to finish the season 4-13, right? Like Tim Tebow was a great leader too, and had guys.
And because of your play, not just like the team around you, kind of.
Right, exactly, and yeah, and Love is playing ball, man, and he's spreading the ball around to different receivers. I think the Packers have figured a few things out about who does what well, and kind of put some of that stuff together too. This weekend's a big test, but I think he gets the game ball. In the college game, Mikey Sainer still. Because there is one play from that game that I think sets the entire tone about where these two programs are, and it's the kill shot on Travion Henderson. And Sainer still is a former 3-star receiver turned cornerback, and he decks Travion Henderson on a play out of the backfield. Henderson outweighs him by probably 100 pounds. Like Sainer still can't weigh more than 60 pounds soaking wet. I think that's incredible. A shout out and some Schadenfreude, which I'll certainly take. Tim Boyle for improving the Packers' second-round pick. Tim Boyle is terrible, guys. He's awful. The laser show, which I never thought was a real thing, is definitely a real thing. Let's move into Kansas City. We're on to Kansas City, as Bill Belichick might say. So my question, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, the interior offensive line, Isaiah Pacheco, Taylor Swift's powers might be in the building on Sunday night. I don't know. I don't pay attention to like when her tour and stuff like that goes, but I basically had it stuck in my head that since these two started dating, that we weren't going to miss an opportunity to have her and Simone Biles in the same building. So I'm thinking that. But the question I have is, what part of this team scares you more, Kansas City's offense or their defense?
Their defense, and I don't mean to say this to discount the Kansas City offense, but I say this in the effect of like, you expect that their offense is going to put 30 points. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's kind of like what we expected the Packers offense with Rodgers, and what I'm sure a lot of opponents were like, well, Rodgers is going to do ABC 1, 2, 3 and score a bunch of points kind of thing. So it's how much can Love do against a Chiefs defense that has looked really stout and spooky this season? And that's why, it's really big that Love is playing a lot better. His receivers and tight ends are playing better. And that his O-line, the biggest difference on offense to me between week 4 and week 12 is the fact that the two best players up front for the Packers were healthy. We didn't have Jenkins in the week 4 Thursday night game, and Tom was playing on one leg. And this past week, both guys were as healthy as they're going to be in the middle of a season where they sustained an injury.
On a further note, that was Rasheed Walker's 3rd career start, and they had just found out that they were putting Bakhtiari on injured reserve. So, there was some shock there, too.
Yeah. So I want to see what this unit, I don't want to say it's necessarily firing on all cylinders, but it's definitely primed much better than it was, like we said a month ago, heading into that Rams game where, we were all kind of rolling our eyes at whatever, it's whistling into the wind more than it sounded like there was a shift coming from this offense. So that's why the Chiefs defense is what I'm more concerned about, is because I expect the Chiefs offense to, and I know I'm going to sound like such a negative Nancy about the Packers defense, but at some point, Barry's defense is going to be Barry's defense kind of thing. And, the Chargers dropped their chances to do that. The Lions, and that was the big thing too, picking Rashawn to be my player of the game, is because, we've been saying it for the last 1.5 years about this matchup between the Packers defense and the Lions offense. Is yes, the Lions offensive line is maybe the best offensive line, especially because Lane Johnson is on IR still for the Eagles right now. But this was the first time that the Packers defensive front took control of any part of a game against the Lions. They've kind of been manhandled in the games that have mattered against the Lions the last couple of years. So it was really good to see them put their foot forward. And that's where, kind of paying it forward, that's what is kind of my big matchups, is the line of scrimmages for this game is like you said, the Chiefs interior O-line against, the Packers front, and then the Packers O-line against this Chiefs front that, outside of Chris Jones, I don't know if anyone can name more than 1 or 2 more players, but there's a lot of there's just a lot of productive players up front for the Chiefs that make that defense go.
Yeah, their pass rush is nasty. So Chris Jones is the best interior pass rusher this side of Aaron Donald. So not the greatest defensive player arguably ever, but the next guy after that, he's pretty damn good. George Karlaftis, very good. Michael Dana's having a good season and in a contract year. Charles Omenihu, and I think I butchered his last name, so I'm sorry, Charles, if I did, but he's having a good season. And that doesn't even include Felix AU from Kansas State, who they took in the first round, and he's basically not even playing because of how productive the guys in front of him have been. The answer for me is the defense as well. So the Chiefs are between 4th and 6th in every defensive category except rush defense, and Green Bay's can't run the ball. So that doesn't matter almost 1 iota because Green Bay can't run it. Aaron Jones isn't going to play most likely. So you're relying on A.J. Dillon and Patrick Taylor against a run defense that's average. They're 18th in rush defense. They're 4th. I think they're 4th, 6th, and 4th in yards per game, passing yards per game, and scoring respectively. It is not the reputation they have, because the reputation when you have a big time quarterback like they do is just that he's got to carry the whole team. Doesn't have to. And that is, something about these Chiefs that is frankly different from what, everybody wants to always compare Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. And a couple things that is Kansas City's done a better job putting an actual defense and a well-coached defense around him. Green Bay didn't do that for a really long time. And secondly, Mahomes has just made more plays in big-time situations than Aaron Rodgers did. And that's a tough reality for some Packer fans to swallow. But, the reality is if both guys retire today, Mahomes is higher in the pantheon than Aaron Rodgers is. And that's just the reality that we live in. And I don't personally care about that, but I know a lot of people do. But the answer for me for this game is the defense for Kansas City, because their offense, you saw it against the Eagles on a Monday night game a couple weeks ago, where they kind of had the problem the Chargers did, where Mahomes puts the ball on the money and drop. And they've got Marquez Valdez-Scantling, puts the ball on the money for a potential game-winning touchdown, drop. Those things can happen. They just don't have, you guys think that Green Bay's receiver room when it was struggling stinks. That receiver room is putrid. Their best receiver and I think he's having a good season, is Rashee Rice. But Rashee Rice is a rookie. Like, your best receiver can't be a rookie, in my opinion, if you're going to be a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah.
That's unless it's like Jamar Chase and he's just immediately awesome right away. Like, that's a little bit different. But the defense for Kansas City is really good. And I didn't even mention L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie. Those are two really good corners that they have. And from a defensive coordinator standpoint, there is no defensive coordinator in the world more decorated than Steve Spagnuolo. And Spagnuolo ate them up and spit them. I don't know why that went up, but cool. Ate them up in the first time they played each other. So that's where my next question kind of comes in, is how much stock, if any, do you put into that game from a couple years ago? So Jordan Love's first start, obviously put into the situation in the middle of the week, and Spagnuolo just blitzes the ever-living piss out of them, which he probably didn't have in his game plan when Aaron Rodgers was slated to be the starting quarterback, but that is what happened. And like I said, blitz, 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 blitz. And the Packers, Love, LaFleur, all of them, none of them had answers for that Kansas City blitz. I looked up today. Jordan Love dropped back 35 times in that game. He was under pressure on 28 of those dropbacks. That is incredible to me that is a real thing. And that was an offensive line that was pretty good, right? They just didn't have answers for Kansas City. Sends 6. We're only blocking with 5, simple stuff like that. And then Love missed a few things here or there too. They scored 7 points and away we went. Do you put any stock into that at all?
Not really, honestly, because so the big factors there is that game was in Arrowhead. It's not in Arrowhead this time. That's a big factor.
Burrowhead.
What's it called?
Burrowhead.
So that's a big factor.
Oh, you meant something else.
Oh, no. It's not in Kansas City. It's in Lambeau this time. That's a big factor. Love is not playing with someone else's game plan this week. I think, and that's where I was kind of disappointed in LaFleur, is like it took him too long to change up what he was trying to do on offense that day, because if you remember how that week worked out, so Green Bay's coming off the big, the emotional win in Arizona the week before on Thursday Night Football. So that what that means is that they start to do their installs like that weekend, over that weekend. Rodgers tests positive for COVID like Monday or Tuesday or something like that. So they've like installed, if not all of their game plan, most of their game plan at that point. And so at that point, and LaFleur, Love not as much, but basically like everyone else who was in the building has kind of said like, yeah, we kind of said, oh, instead of junking everything, let's just coach Jordan up a little bit more and have him try to run the Rodgers offense kind of thing. And not to say that it would have shifted so much, but there was a lot of things that like you didn't see as much play action, or, like just the stuff, the kind of like helper plays for a young quarterback. And I think Love is just, he's 2 more years into the league. And he's also at the point where I know one of the things that you keep saying is like, he's a 4th-year pro and, he's not a rookie. And that is true. And at the same time, there are certain things that you can only learn by playing football. Correct. Like you can't. That's the thing, is like, oh, why don't they practice this? Why don't they? I said, I guarantee you that no one is going to rush as hard as Chris Jones is going to rush in a real game. You cannot simulate pressure, the realism of pressure. You cannot simulate the realism of crowd noise, field conditions, but all that kind of stuff. So the only way you get used to that is playing games. And Love has played, a dozen more games basically to this point than he had going into that Chiefs game. So I just think it makes it's a night and day difference. I still think Spags is going to throw more heat than he won't. I don't think he's going to have that sort of, like you said, I doubt he blitzes Rodgers as much as he blitzed Love. I still think he's going to put more pressure on Love because, like you said, I think Spags is going to look at it like, if AJ Dillon runs for 150 yards, okay, like we can live with that kind of thing. We don't want it, but okay, cool. Like, yeah, we'll take that because, is it going to be, is it on 30 carries or is it on 40 carries kind of thing to get to 150 yards? But I think that it's an acceptable outcome. So I do expect, things that Love hasn't seen yet to be thrown his way. Some things that maybe he did see a couple years ago thrown his way. But I think that it's going to look a lot different because this is just a different team too, and also you had the like Devontae coming back from COVID, and so you had all these weird like factors that are into play. And I think the big keys are that, we haven't seen an injury report yet, but Watson looks healthy, and not like healthy enough to play healthy, but he looks like he's back there. Like I joked that Love's throw on the first play of the game was a little short because he's been throwing to a, good enough to play Watson, but not like a totally healthy Watson. And he did look pretty explosive on Thanksgiving against the Lions. So that's something that they haven't really had. And then I think because the receivers look so much more comfortable, because Tucker Kraft is blocking better now, I do think LaFleur is going to throw more, and some people are like, oh my God, they tried the statue, not the Statue of Liberty, but the Philly special and stuff.
How dare you?
But, Joe and I have talked about it where they've run about a trick play a game, and most of like the Philly special is probably the one that inherently just did not work because it got blown up. The rest of them have either were going to work or did work, and like they didn't work because Jordan Love's foot slips out on the G logo at midfield against the Saints, and things like that where it's like it was there, the play was there. So I do think that LaFleur is going to quote unquote get in his bag this week, because it's going to be one of those games where, as much better as the Packers are playing, as much as the Chiefs offense is struggling, they're still David going up against Goliath, and they're going to need a couple extra special stones in their sling bag to bring down the giant.
That they will. I think that, the one thing that I guess I put into stock is like it is a bit of a mulligan for LaFleur and Jordan Love, and I think they've talked about that game. The other thing is Spagnuolo, like, the interesting part of this defense is the Chiefs defense is more talented than it was 2 years ago. So they have the schematic prowess of Spags, but they have better players back. Like Trent McDuffie was not on the Chiefs for that game. Jarius Sneed, I don't believe was either. So, or if he was like a rookie, doing that. Anthony Sorensen was a meme. Like they made him, he was the worst defensive player in football. And it was like a guy that we made fun of.
That's what we scored on.
Right. And Green Bay only scored 7 points that day. So that was not good for anybody. I'm at least curious to see if, what it's kind of a, what have you learned? Or can you make adjustment quickly when you see something is not going that way? Or Jordan Love, like Spags is going to try and trick you. You have to play clean football against the Chiefs. You cannot turn the football over against them because they smell blood. And again, that when it comes to organizations, if you do like the most important parts of the organization, you won't find many duos better than Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, if any. I don't know if you'll find any at this point in the NFL now that Tom Brady has retired and is no longer teamed up with the hoodie. But that's the way that it is. We'll get to the game pick portion of the show. The Packers are a 6.5 point underdog. The over-under for this game is 42.5. So basically 22-20, if you will. 23-20 Chiefs is the over kind of thing, which isn't exactly how the line works and all that stuff. But I'm not good at math, so I'm not going to try and do that in front of God and everybody as we sit here. But curious where your thoughts on this are, Mike. What is your take on who wins this game and why?
I think in the end, the Chiefs are going to win, but I think the Packers can beat that line. Like I said, if they play clean football, this is going to be one of those games where, and I know that some people scratch their head when you say this, but this is one of those games where you tell Jordan, like, punting is good in this game. Like obviously you want to score and stuff like that, but don't give them short feet. Like we talked about this. Chiefs offense isn't humming right now. It's sputtering a little bit here and there. It's leaking some oil. So don't give them short fields. Don't give them the easy route kind of thing. Keep playing clean football. You've done that for 2 weeks in a row. And that's the big thing with Love over this past month. That's kind of reaffirmed what I was, hoping he would be this season. And I think what's also like kind of shifted your view is that the splash plays have been there from the preseason, week one. The splash plays have been there. It's what he's done in between the splash plays that's the biggest indicator of his improvement. Week one, like through the Saints game, it's like, oh, they're incompletions. when the bad streak was happening, oh, they're like, where is he throwing the ball to interceptions? And now it's like, oh, good, that's a chain moving completion. That's a productive play kind of thing and stuff. That's what he's got to keep going. And I'm not saying that like he has to get to a point where he's hitting like, he's hitting 500 with like a 1200 OPS or anything like that. That'll come, hope that's what you're hoping is to come. But, hit 250 with, hit a few dingers here and there kind of thing, and just kind of see where it goes from there kind of game. But I do think, you have to give the Chiefs their prop, but I think the Packers are playing hot enough that they're at home. They're coming off a high, little bit of extra prep time. LaFleur has a little more time in the lab that they might cover. I think that they'll cover, but I do think that these two teams are hitting the over unless the weather just goes wonky this weekend.
Last I looked, it was supposed to be like 30 with maybe a chance of rain on Sunday night. So, but I don't know. I'll have to look again as we get here. You were talking about like why I'm in on Love versus why I wasn't. It's the old, there's a text that Jacob Morley often shares. It's like, it doesn't matter if he can do awesome stuff if he can't do the simple stuff. And like now the Packers and Love specifically are starting to hit the simple stuff. That 3-step drop, hit the slant, that's there. The hitting a check down in rhythm so he doesn't have to turn around and make the catch or anything like that. The command of the offense, stuff like that is now like, yeah, it's cool when Jordan Love does the funky arm angle, drop his shoulder and throw it around a guy or whatever. All that stuff is fine and dandy. But it doesn't matter if he does that twice a game, if he misses like 8 easy completions and all of a sudden they're at the bottom of the NFL. Like, I know at the beginning of the season, the running joke was that completion percentage like doesn't matter or whatever, but yes, it does when they're not completing passes because Love can't hit the broadside of a barn, which was the case at the early portion of the season. That has since gotten better. However, when it comes to Sunday night, the Kansas City Chiefs are the team that should win. They're a 6.5-point favorite. They have the better head coach, no disrespect to Matt LaFleur, Andy Reid's a Hall of Famer. They have better personnel on the defensive side of the ball. Their weaknesses, in theory, don't match up necessarily with Green Bay's strengths. Green Bay's strengths don't necessarily match up with Kansas City's weaknesses, except for one big one. Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Kingsley Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness against those offensive tackles. Van Ness maybe doesn't belong in that conversation of a strength just yet, but Sunday could be a big game for him. Sunday could be a big game for those other 3 guys I just mentioned. And the way you beat Patrick Mahomes is to get pressure with your front 4 and not having to send blitzes. Jawan Taylor, Donovan Smith, 2 of the worst offensive tackles in football, maybe one of the worst tandems between the 2 of them in offensive football. I think Green Bay covers. Moreover, I think Green Bay wins. Packers 30, Chiefs 24, because that score has been good to me in the last week. So I will take that as your final score. I am in on the Green Bay Packers, and my article that will come out on Tuesday will say, enough is enough. Sign that man to an extension. Jordan Love is the future of the Green Bay Packers. Packers 30, Chiefs 24, which also hits the over. We're out of show. We got the freezer here on deck, so be sure to stick around and check that out. Brendan will be back next week, thankfully, so I don't have to drive this show. We'll be doing all those kinds of that. I am taking the over on this from Iowa Joe. Over under 15.5 times. I'll say this, there will be more cutaways to Taylor Swift on Sunday Night Football than there will be Iowa points on Saturday Night Football. How about that? Let's go that route. Thank you guys, as always, for listening, watching, paying attention, letting us do this thing. It's a whole lot of fun. I appreciate you guys that have stopped and watched at any point. Like, subscribe, rate, do all that fun stuff. From Mike Kawano, I'm Jacob Westendorf. We'll see you guys next week.